He was strong. The Undertaker stood across the ring from men who could break bones with their hands. He stared down giants who weighed more than two normal people combined. He survived battles that left blood on the canvas and scars on his body that never fully healed. For 30 years, Mark Calloway became a legend by refusing to break. But even legends have limits. Even the dead man felt pain. The Undertaker recently revealed his toughest opponents. Not his greatest matches, not the ones that made him famous or proud. The toughest, the ones who hurt him the most, the ones who made him question whether he could finish the match, the ones who left pieces of him behind in that ring. At the top of that list sits Yokozuna, the man Undertaker himself called his toughest opponent ever. Over 550 pounds of pure, crushing weight. Every slam was a war. Every move risked injury. Every night wrestling Yokozuna meant waking up the next morning feeling like a car had run over his spine. But what does toughness really mean when even the Phenom admits these men nearly broke him? This is not a celebration. This is an examination of pain. A look at what wrestling demands from those who refuse to quit. The Undertaker's toughest opponents were not just skilled performers. They were dangerous. They were unpredictable. They were the kind of men who made even the dead man wonder if tonight would be the night his body finally gave out. Undertaker always separated his greatest opponents from his toughest ones. Shawn Michaels gave him his most beautiful matches. Triple H created his most emotional stories. But those men did not make this list based on their storytelling. They made it because of the physical price they demanded. They made it because working with them meant choosing pain over safety. They made it because every encounter left Undertaker counting the cost of being indestructible. Wrestling fans see the spectacle. They see the drama and the championships and the moments that live forever in the highlight reels. But beneath every legendary career lies a darker truth. The truth of broken bodies. The truth of men who pushed too hard and paid with their health. The truth that toughness in professional wrestling often means surviving opponents who blur the line between performance and genuine violence. The Undertaker faced them all. The immovable giants who crushed his joints with their weight. The legitimate fighters who brought real combat into a scripted world. The maniacs who sacrificed their own bodies and demanded he do the same. The Iron Men who simply refused to stay down no matter how hard he hit them. This list reveals something darker than respect. It reveals the anatomy of destruction. It shows how 30 years of facing the toughest men in wrestling history slowly dismantled even the most durable performer who ever lived. From the suffocating pressure of wrestling super heavyweights to the psychological terror of facing legitimate shooters to the soul-crushing endurance battles that defined his final years. The Undertaker's toughest opponents represent a journey through pain itself. These 10 men did not just test Undertaker. They damaged him. They took something from him that he could never get back. And in understanding who hurt him the most, we understand the true cost of being the last outlaw in a business built on sacrifice. ERA 1, Immovable Giants. 10, John Cena. The list begins at number 10 with a man who represents the modern evolution of toughness. John Cena was not the biggest opponent Undertaker ever faced. He was not the most legitimate fighter. He did not bring the stiffest strikes or the most dangerous reputation. What Cena brought was something more insidious. He brought inevitability. Cena was the Iron Man, the performer who absorbed punishment that would end other careers and return the next night like nothing happened. He represented a different kind of nightmare for the Undertaker. Not the nightmare of being crushed or submitted or knocked unconscious. The nightmare of fighting someone who simply would not stay down. Their battles came late in Undertaker's career, when his body was already a collection of surgeries and taped joints. By the time Cena became his rival, the dead man was performing on borrowed time. Every match required careful planning. Every move had to be executed perfectly or risk injury that could end everything. Cena forced Undertaker to dig deeper than his body wanted to go. Their encounters demanded stamina that a younger Undertaker possessed naturally, but an older Undertaker had to manufacture through sheer determination. Cena could go 30 minutes at full speed. Cena could take a tombstone and kick out. Cena could absorb chair shots and choke slams and still find the strength to lift Undertaker for an attitude adjustment. The physical toll was not about single moments of impact. It was about sustained intensity. It was about knowing that no matter what move Undertaker hit, Cena would kick out. No matter how much punishment Cena absorbed, he would come back with more energy. The psychological drain of fighting someone with seemingly infinite endurance wore Undertaker down in ways that pure power never could. Cena represented the final evolution of what toughness meant to the Undertaker. Not just surviving, not just enduring, but maintaining peak performance against an opponent who defined resilience for an entire generation. Their rivalry symbolized the passing of one era into another. The dead man facing the man who would replace him as WWE's Ultimate Iron Man. The cost was exhaustion. The cost was pushing a body past reasonable limits. The cost was accepting that even at his best, even with all his his experience and legendary durability, Undertaker could no longer outlast the new breed of superstar who trained differently and recovered faster and simply had youth on their side. Cena made number 10 because he forced Undertaker to realize his own mortality, not through violence, not through danger, but through the simple, undeniable fact that eventually someone would have more left in the tank, and that someone was John Cena. 9. Mark Henry. If Cena was inevitability, Mark Henry was raw, verifiable force. The world's strongest man did not earn that title through wrestling storylines. He earned it by competing in Olympic weightlifting, by setting records that still stand today, by possessing strength that was not manufactured for television, but proven in legitimate athletic competition. Wrestling Mark Henry meant wrestling gravity itself. Undertaker acknowledged Henry as a phenomenal big man, and that acknowledgement came from experience. Henry was not just heavy, he was dense. His muscle mass created a different kind of challenge than fat-based weight. When Henry set his stance, moving him became nearly impossible. Basic wrestling mechanics depend on leverage and cooperation. Performers work together to make moves look devastating while minimizing actual injury. But when an opponent possesses genuine world-class strength, that cooperation becomes a battle. Henry could resist moves without even trying. His natural power meant that if Henry did not want to go up for a slam, Undertaker had to use every ounce of strength to make it happen. The physical demand was constant and cumulative. Every transition became a power struggle. Every slam required perfect technique or risk a torn muscle. Every moment in the ring with Henry meant Undertaker was lifting, pushing, and maneuvering weight that his body was never designed to handle, night after night after night. Henry's placement at number 9 reflects the pure physicality he demanded. He was not trying to hurt Undertaker. He was not stiff or dangerous or reckless. He was simply too strong and too heavy to work with easily. His legitimate strength credentials meant that wrestling him was less like performing and more like engaging in actual strength competition. The toll showed in Undertaker's back, in his knees, in his shoulders. Mark Henry represented the foundational challenge of big man wrestling taken to its extreme. He was what happened when real-world athletic achievement met professional wrestling performance, and the result was a physical burden that accumulated with every match they worked together. Henry made the list because his toughness was not about attitude or reputation. It was about simple, unavoidable physics. Moving a body that's strong and that heavy requires a price, and The Undertaker paid it every single time they stepped into the ring together. 8. Batista. If Lesnar was the reality check, Batista was the warning sign. At number 8 stands the man who exemplified the modern powerhouse during what many consider Undertaker's final peak years. Batista possessed explosive power, heavyweight size, and an Iron Man reputation that made him one of the most physically demanding opponents of the mid-2000s. Their 2007 feud represented something special. This was Undertaker performing at his highest level during the Ruthless Aggression era. His body was still relatively healthy, his intensity remained maximum, and Batista pushed him harder than almost anyone during that period. Their matches required relentless high-impact exchanges that tested both men's limits. Batista's working style combined power with pace. He was not content to work a slow, methodical big man match. He wanted to explode with offense, to hit power moves in rapid succession, to maintain intensity throughout the entire contest. This approach forced Undertaker to match that pace while executing his own power offense against an opponent who could absorb tremendous punishment. The physical challenge was about sustained collision. Every exchange felt like car crashes. Every slam had real impact. Every strike connected with force. Batista did not work soft, and Undertaker respected that. Their matches had weight and consequence because both men committed fully to making the action feel devastating. Peers recognized Batista as a true physical Iron Man. His ability to work long matches at high intensity made him a nightmare opponent for veterans managing injuries. Undertaker had to dig deep to keep up, had to find reserves of stamina and power to meet Batista's explosive style, had to accept that their matches would leave him sore and exhausted in ways that slower-paced encounters never did. Batista's placement at number 8 reflects the evolution of power wrestling into the modern era. He was not just big and strong, he was athletic and explosive. He represented what happened when traditional heavyweight power merged with modern conditioning and training methods. The result was an opponent who hit as hard as the old giants, but moved faster and lasted longer. The toll was accumulation. Every match with Batista added wear to Undertaker's chassis. The high-impact style accelerated the aging process. The fast pace tested cardiovascular limits. The powerful offense stressed joints and muscles in ways that would create problems years later. Batista did not injure Undertaker in single moments. He eroded him gradually through sustained physical demand. Batista made the list because he represented the last golden age of pain in WWE, the era where power wrestling still dominated before the lighter, faster style became standard. He and Undertaker crashed into each other with prehistoric force, surface, and both men wore the scars of those collisions. Those scars are why Batista earned his place among Undertaker's toughest opponents. 7. Triple H. Batista tested Undertaker's body during his prime, but Triple H tested it during its decline. At number 7 stands the man who engaged Undertaker in some of his most grueling, violent matches when the dead man was in his late 40s and wrestling on a body held together by surgery and determination. Triple H appears on Undertaker's list of opponents he was most proud of. Their WrestleMania encounters became legendary for their storytelling and emotional weight, but beneath that artistic excellence lay brutal physical reality. Their matches were described as more hard-hitting than even the classics with Shawn Michaels. They were designed for maximum exhaustion and pain tolerance. The physical challenge was about endurance at the worst possible time. By the time Undertaker and Triple H had their most famous encounters, the dead man was performing once a year at WrestleMania. His body needed months to recover from each match. His injuries accumulated faster than they healed, and yet he agreed to work 30-minute wars with one of the stiffest workers in the business. Their Hell in a Cell and no holds, barred matches were exercises in controlled brutality. Chair shots that rattled skulls, table spots that compressed spines, extended sequences that pushed both men to the edge of unconsciousness. Triple H did not ask for protection, and Undertaker did not offer it. They agreed to hurt each other in the name of creating legendary moments. The end of an era match exemplified the physical toll. Both men were veterans in their 40s. Both carried decades of injuries. Both knew this might be their final encounter, so they pushed harder than logic suggested. They delivered punishment that their bodies could not properly absorb. They created a masterpiece that cost them pieces of themselves they would never recover. Triple H's placement at number 7 reflects the unique challenge of working intense matches during physical decline. Facing Triple H in 2001 would have been difficult but manageable. Facing him in 2011 and 2012 was borderline reckless. Undertaker's body simply was not designed to survive that intensity anymore, but his pride and his commitment to the business demanded he try anyway. The toll was catastrophic. The matches with Triple H accelerated Undertaker's physical decline. They forced him to work beyond safe limits. They prioritized spectacle over self-preservation. And while fans remember the brilliance, Undertaker's body remembers the price. The pain that lingered for months, the recovery that took longer each time, the realization that he was sacrificing his post-wrestling quality of life for moments that lasted less than 30 minutes. Triple H made the list because he represented the endurance test era, the period when toughness meant surviving matches that should not happen, when pride overrode common sense, when The Undertaker and his fiercest rival agreed to destroy each other slowly, publicly, beautifully, tragically. Their matches were not just tough, they were suicidal, and both men knew it while they were happening. 6. Ken Shamrock. If Yokozuna was pure overwhelming force, Ken Shamrock was precise, calculated danger. At number 6 stands the man who brought legitimate mixed martial arts into mainstream wrestling before most fans even understood what that meant. Shamrock was not playing a tough guy. He was a UFC superfight champion. He was the king of pancreas. He was a world-class submission specialist who could genuinely hurt you if things went wrong. Shamrock represented a transitional moment in wrestling history. Before him, toughness meant being big or stiff or willing to take punishment. After him, toughness meant being able to actually fight. Shamrock's presence in WWE during the Attitude Era forced everyone to work differently. His legitimate background created a psychological burden that pure wrestlers never experience. For Undertaker, facing Shamrock meant facing real combat dynamics. Shamrock's submissions were not wrestling holds designed to look painful. They were techniques that could tear ligaments if applied incorrectly. His strikes came from martial arts training, not wrestling training. His ground game was built on legitimate grappling systems designed to incapacitate opponents. The physical challenge was about constant vigilance. Undertaker could not afford to make positioning mistakes. He could not allow Shamrock to secure certain holds. He had to maintain absolute awareness of where his limbs were and how Shamrock might exploit them. The mental energy required to work safely with a legitimate fighter added exhaustion beyond the physical demands. Shamrock's volatile reputation added another layer. Stories circulated about his intensity and his temper. While Shamrock was professional, the knowledge that he possessed genuine fighting ability created tension. Undertaker had to trust that Shamrock would maintain control, that he would not apply submissions too hard, that the line between performance and real combat would remain clear. The toll was psychological as much as physical. Facing Shamrock meant accepting that this was not just cooperative performance art. This was controlled violence involving someone who knew how to make violence real. The pressure of maintaining that control while delivering an exciting match exhausted Undertaker in ways that pure power opponents never did. Shamrock made number 6 because he represented the future of toughness in wrestling. He showed that legitimate combat credentials would become increasingly important. He forced Undertaker Undertaker to evolve his approach and acknowledge that toughness no longer just meant size and power, it now meant genuine fighting ability. And facing genuine fighters meant accepting new kinds of danger that previous generations never had to consider. 5. Vader. Mark Henry was strong, but Vader was violent. Leon White did not just possess heavyweight power, he weaponized it. Vader was known throughout wrestling as one of the stiffest workers in the business. His punches connected, his clotheslines left bruises, his power bombs drove opponents into the mat with concussive force. Undertaker reacted to Vader's infamous altercations with other wrestlers. He understood what it meant to face a man who blurred the line between performance and legitimate combat. Vader believed in protecting the business by making wrestling look real, and the way he made it look real was by making it hurt. Their matches were brutal, bone-jarring confrontations. Vader moved with surprising agility for a man his size, but his offense was pure punishment. He threw his entire 400-plus pounds into every strike. He delivered stiff punches to the face. He landed splashes that drove the air from Undertaker's lungs. He worked at a pace that made every sequence feel like a street fight. The physical challenge Vader presented combined the weight issues of Yokozuna with genuine aggression. Where Yokozuna was a massive obstacle to overcome, Vader was a massive weapon trying to hurt you. The psychological element added to the difficulty. Undertaker had to be constantly aware that Vader's strikes were not pulled, that his offense would leave real damage, that any moment of lost focus could result in a legitimate injury. Vader's placement at number 5 reflects the evolution from pure size challenge to aggressive power challenge. He represented the moment when big men stopped being just heavy and started being dangerous. His uncompromising physicality forced Undertaker to work stiffer himself, to respond with real force, to accept that these matches would hurt and that the pain was the point. The cost was visible. Undertaker's face showed the welts from Vader's punches. His body showed the bruises from Vader's impact. Every match with Vader meant absorbing legitimate punishment in the name of making wrestling look believable. And while fans appreciated the realism, Undertaker's body paid the price for that authenticity. Vader made the list because he refused to work soft. He refused to protect his opponents beyond the bare minimum necessary to avoid genuine injury. His toughness was not defensive, it was offensive. And that offense left marks on The Undertaker that lasted long after the matches ended. 4. Mick Foley. But if Triple H represented controlled brutality, Mick Foley represented insanity. At number 4 stands the man whose name is forever linked to The Undertaker's most infamous match, Hell in a Cell 1998. The match that redefined what violence could look like in wrestling, the match that nearly killed Foley, the match that Undertaker has expressed guilt about for decades. Foley's toughness was not about size or skill or legitimate fighting ability. It was about pathological pain tolerance, about a willingness to sacrifice his body in ways that violated basic human self-preservation instincts. Foley took bumps that should have ended his career. He absorbed punishment that should have killed him, and he kept coming back for more. The Hell in a Cell match created trauma for both men. The first fall off the cage was planned, but still catastrophic. Foley landed with concussive force that legitimately knocked him unconscious. Undertaker thought he had killed his friend. The match should have stopped there, but Foley insisted on continuing. The second fall through the cage was not planned. The cage roof broke. Foley fell 15 feet and landed on the mat with a chair smashing his face. Teeth went through his lip. His shoulder separated. He was genuinely injured and barely conscious. And still the match continued. The physical challenge Foley presented was ethical. How far could Undertaker push before he crossed from performance into genuine harm? Foley's willingness to endure made him dangerous to himself and to his opponents. Undertaker had to make decisions in real time about whether continuing the match served the business or just satisfied bloodlust. Their rivalry extended beyond that one match, but that match defined everything. It established a standard of brutality that permanently altered high-stakes wrestling. It showed that some performers would literally die in the ring if allowed. It proved that toughness could be mental illness disguised as dedication. Foley's placement at number 4 reflects the psychological toll he took on Undertaker. The guilt, the concern, the knowledge that their matches pushed beyond reasonable limits. Foley forced Undertaker to be more violent than he wanted to be, to participate in spectacles that served the audience but damaged both performers. The toll was spiritual. Undertaker has spoken about watching footage of that Hell in a Cell match and feeling horror at what they did. Not pride, not satisfaction, horror, because in the moment, with adrenaline and crowd energy and professional pride, it seemed necessary. But in retrospect, it was madness. Foley made the list because his toughness challenged Undertaker's conscience, because working with him meant crossing lines that should not be crossed, because their matches exemplified the darker truth about professional wrestling, that sometimes toughness is not admirable. Sometimes it is just self-destruction that we applaud because we are too far away to see the real damage. And The Undertaker saw saw that damage up close. He caused some of it, and he has carried that weight ever since. 3. Haku Ken Shamrock brought legitimate fighting credentials to wrestling, but Haku brought something darker. At number 3 stands a man whose reputation transcended wrestling itself. Haku, also known as Meng, was not just respected, he was feared. Not by fans, by wrestlers, by the toughest men in the locker room who would face anyone else without hesitation, but made sure never to cross Haku. The stories about Haku are legendary and disturbing. Tales of bar fights where he bit off noses, accounts of altercations where multiple attackers ended up hospitalized, whispers about a man who possessed such genuine old-school toughness that even the shooters did not want to test him. These were not marketing stories. These were warnings passed between professionals who knew the difference between wrestling tough and street tough. For Undertaker, facing Haku meant facing the embodiment of locker room enforcement. Haku was a respected leader for decades. His mere presence established order. His reputation ensured that the line between performance and reality remained crystal clear, because crossing Haku meant facing consequences that had nothing to do with scripted outcomes. The challenge was psychological intimidation taken to its extreme. Undertaker was himself a locker room leader. He commanded respect through his professionalism and his veteran status. But Haku's respect came from genuine fear, from the knowledge that if things escalated, Haku would win. Not because of size or training, but because of an uncompromising willingness to do whatever necessary. Working with Haku required perfect professionalism. It demanded absolute respect for the craft and for the man himself. Any perceived slight could create tension that went beyond typical wrestling politics. Undertaker had to maintain focus and control while understanding that his opponent was the one person in the industry nobody wanted to genuinely fight. Haku's placement at number 3 reflects the pure intimidation factor. He was not the biggest opponent Undertaker faced. He was not the most credentialed fighter, but he was the most genuinely dangerous human being. The one whose toughness was not about sport or performance, but about survival instinct and street-level violence that existed outside all rules and regulations. The toll was stress. The psychological burden of working with someone that legitimately fearsome added weight to every match. Undertaker respected Haku deeply because respect was the only rational response. And that respect came from understanding that beneath the performance existed a man who represented pure, unfiltered toughness from an era when wrestling was closer to actual combat than anyone today can fully comprehend. Haku made the list because he was the silent enforcer, the man nobody talked about challenging, the benchmark for legitimate, non-kayfabe toughness that made even The Undertaker proceed with caution. His presence on this list is not about matches or moments. It is about recognizing that some men carry danger with them as naturally as breathing, and Haku was that man. 2. Brock Lesnar. But if Haku was danger waiting in the shadows, Brock Lesnar was danger standing in broad daylight, daring you to do something about it. At number 2 stands the most credentialed combat athlete Undertaker ever faced, an NCAA Division I wrestling champion, a UFC heavyweight champion, a physical specimen who combined size, speed, and legitimate fighting ability into a package that made him as dangerous as any human being on the planet. Lesnar represented everything that made modern toughness different from old-school toughness. He was not just playing a monster, he was an actual athletic monster who could genuinely hurt you. His wrestling credentials were legitimate. His UFC championship was real. His reputation for stiff, physical work was earned through years of making opponents feel every single suplex. For Undertaker, facing Lesnar meant facing his physical superior. That is not an insult. It is a fact. Lesnar was younger, stronger, faster, and possessed real combat skills that surpassed what Undertaker learned through professional wrestling. The psychological burden of facing someone who could legitimately defeat you in a real fight added pressure that few opponents could match. Their matches were notoriously physical. Lesnar's suplexes were not gentle. His strikes connected with real force. His intensity level was maximum from bell to bell. Undertaker had to match that intensity while managing a body that was decades older and accumulating injuries that Lesnar did not yet carry. The famous UFC 121 confrontation made their rivalry even more complex. When Undertaker appeared at Lesnar's UFC fight and they exchanged words, the line between WWE storyline and genuine competitive tension blurred completely. That moment revealed real feelings beneath the scripted rivalry. It showed that facing Lesnar was not just about performing, it was about proving himself against someone who achieved success in real combat sports. The ultimate cost came at WrestleMania 30 when Lesnar ended the streak. That moment was not just a storyline decision, it was acknowledgement that eventually reality wins. That eventually the legitimate fighter defeats the professional wrestler. That all the mystique and all the character work and all the legendary status cannot overcome genuine athletic superiority forever. Lesnar made number 2 because he forced Undertaker to confront his own limitations. Not just physical limitations, but philosophical ones. Lesnar represented the future. A future where combat credentials mattered more than wrestling tradition, where legitimate toughness overshadowed performed toughness, where the dead man's aura of invincibility could be shattered by someone who existed outside wrestling's protective bubble of cooperation. The toll was existential. Facing Lesnar meant accepting that his era was ending, that his body could not match this new breed of hybrid athlete, that his legendary durability would eventually break against someone who approached wrestling with combat sport intensity. Lesnar was not just tough, he was the reality check that ended the fantasy. And that hurt worse than any suplex ever could. 1. Yokozuna. But if Vader was dangerous, Yokozuna was overwhelming. At number 1 stands the man. Undertaker himself named as his toughest opponent ever. Not because Yokozuna was mean, not because he was stiff or dangerous or possessed legitimate fighting skills, but because of sheer, undeniable crushing size combined with genuine toughness that transcended his character. Yokozuna regularly weighed over 550 pounds. That number is not storytelling. That is not exaggeration. That is the actual physical reality Undertaker had to manage multiple times in their long rivalry. And that weight created challenges that no amount of skill or experience could fully overcome. Consider the mechanics. The Tombstone Piledriver is Undertaker's signature move. It requires lifting an opponent, inverting them, and dropping to the knees while controlling their descent to protect their neck. With a 200-pound opponent, it is difficult but manageable. With a 550-pound opponent, it becomes an engineering problem. Undertaker had to generate enough force to lift that mass. He had to maintain perfect balance while inverted with that weight pressing down on his shoulders. He had to control the descent while protecting both Yokozuna's neck and his own spine. One small mistake meant catastrophic injury to either man, and he had to do this not once, but repeatedly throughout their long series of matches. The physical toll was cumulative and permanent. Lifting Yokozuna compressed Undertaker's vertebrae. It stressed his knees beyond their design limits. It required engaging his entire core with such intensity that hernias became a real risk. Every night wrestling Yokozuna meant waking up the next morning, feeling like his body had been through a car accident. But the challenge went beyond just the weight. Undertaker described Yokozuna's genuine toughness in and out of the ring. This was not just a character playing a monster. This was a legitimately hard individual who commanded respect through his presence and his attitude. The psychological element of facing someone that physically imposing added to the burden. Yokozuna represented the absolute peak of the size-based challenge. No opponent before or after combined that much mass with that much legitimate toughness. Brock Lesnar was dangerous but weighed 300 pounds. Vader was aggressive but was more mobile and slightly lighter. Mark Henry was strong but had a more cooperative working style. Yokozuna was the immovable object taken to its logical extreme. And moving him, slamming him, executing moves on him required a physical price that accumulated over time. The wear and tear on Undertaker's joints was measurable. The long-term damage to his back was unavoidable. The simple reality of wrestling someone that heavy that often meant accepting permanent physical consequences. His placement at number 1 is not debatable. Undertaker said it himself. Yokozuna was his toughest opponent ever. Not his greatest, not his most skilled, not his most memorable, his toughest. The one who demanded the most physically, the one who left the deepest mark on his body, the one who proved that sometimes pure size and power create a challenge that cannot be overcome through technique alone. It can only be survived. And survival comes at a cost that The Undertaker paid for the rest of his career. The Undertaker's list of toughest opponents is not a celebration of strength. It is a catalog of damage. Each name represents a piece of Mark Calloway that stayed in the ring after the match ended. Each wrestler took something from the dead man that he could never fully recover. Yokozuna crushed his spine with overwhelming size. Vader bruised his body with relentless stiffness. Mark Henry stressed his joints with legitimate power. These giants from the early era proved that sometimes the challenge is simple physics, that moving immovable objects requires a price measured in compressed vertebrae and torn cartilage. Brock Lesnar shattered his aura of invincibility. Haku forced him to acknowledge genuine danger. Ken Shamrock introduced the psychological burden of facing legitimate fighters. These shooters from the modern era showed that toughness evolved beyond size, that real combat credentials created new forms of pressure that previous generations never experienced. Mick Foley traumatized him with suicidal dedication. Triple H exhausted him during his physical decline. Batista accelerated his aging process with explosive power. John Cena forced him to confront his own mortality by simply outlasting him. These endurance warriors from his later years proved that toughness is not just about single matches. It is about accumulation, about the slow grind of facing opponent after opponent while your body breaks down and your recovery time extends and your margin for error shrinks. The toughest opponents are not always the greatest opponents. Shawn Michaels gave Undertaker beautiful matches matches. But he is not on this list because beauty does not leave scars. Technical excellence does not compress spines. Perfect storytelling does not accelerate physical decline. This list reveals the true cost of being The Undertaker. 30 years of facing the toughest men in wrestling history. 30 years of lifting giants and surviving shooters and enduring madmen. 30 years of choosing pain over safety because the character demanded it and the business required it, and his pride would not allow anything less. Maybe the scariest thing about The Undertaker's toughest opponents is realizing that even he was not indestructible, that beneath the supernatural character existed a human being whose body could only absorb so much punishment before breaking, that every match with Yokozuna compressed his spine a little more, that every encounter with Lesnar reminded him of his physical limitations, that every war with Triple H and Foley stole time from his post-wrestling life. The list is not about glory, it is about survival, about men who tested the dead man's limits and found them, about opponents who proved that toughness in professional wrestling often means enduring what should not be endured, sacrificing what should not be sacrificed, continuing when stopping would be wiser. From Yokozuna's crushing size to Lesnar's brutal reality, to Foley's insane pain tolerance to Cena's endless endurance, The Undertaker's toughest opponents represent a journey through 3 decades of physical warfare. They represent the evolution of what toughness means. They represent the price of being legendary, and that price was paid in pieces of Mark Calloway left behind in rings across the world. Pieces he can never get back. Pieces that ache on cold mornings and during long nights, and whenever he remembers what it cost to be The Undertaker. The toughest opponents did not just challenge him, they changed him, they damaged him, they took something irreplaceable, and even the dead man cannot resurrect what was lost to the business he loved.
I didn't want it to look that real. I was again overrun with emotion, and I wanted to inflict damage as much as humanly possible on national television, so I chose to go about breaking a window in a different way.
People always said he's the toughest when Goldberg walked out for a fight. The man was unstoppable. He was a monster. He crushed opponents in seconds. His streak reached 173 wins. Nobody could touch him. But some rivals didn't fold. Some pushed him past his limits. Some exposed the cracks in his armor, and some changed everything. Bill Goldberg arrived in wrestling with one goal: destroy everyone. His background came from 7 years in the NFL. He trained hard at the WCW power plant. His style was built on fierce brutality, not technical skill. Quick matches, fast finishes, the spear, the jackhammer, done. Fans loved it. He became world heavyweight champion in less than 10 months. That streak defined him, 173-0. Nobody had seen anything like it. The formula was simple: walk out, demolish, walk away. Average is the enemy. That was his motto. And for a while it worked perfectly. Every week, another victim. Every match, another conquest. The crowd chanted his name. Security had to hold them back. Goldberg became bigger than wrestling itself. He became a cultural phenomenon, a mainstream attraction, someone your dad knew about even if he never watched wrestling. But here's the problem. When your entire career depends on winning fast, every long match becomes a threat. When fans expect destruction in 3 minutes, a 10-minute match feels wrong. Goldberg's dominance relied on never showing weakness, never struggling, never looking human. So which rivals made him look human? Which ones forced him to fight longer than he wanted? Which ones proved he had limits? That's what we're here to find out. Only 5 men ever beat Goldberg cleanly in the ring. 5 out of hundreds of matches. That's why we can't just count wins and losses. The real measure of a tough rival is different. It's about who challenged the character itself, who made the formula stop working, who exposed the flaws that everyone whispered about backstage. Some rivals beat him with politics, some beat him with skill, some beat him with pure power, and one rival beat him every single day, himself. Let's go through them. All 10, from the absolute toughest down to the one that haunted him most. These are the rivals that defined Goldberg's career, for better or worse. Each one tested him in ways that wins and losses can't capture. Each one revealed something about the man behind the monster, and each one proved that even the most dominant force in wrestling history had vulnerabilities. Number 10, Goldberg's own limitations. This isn't a joke. This is real. Goldberg's biggest enemy wasn't in the ring. It was in his head. It was in his approach. It was in his body. Critics didn't hold back. They called him out constantly. Wrestling insiders made jokes. They said Goldberg's toughest rivals were the door, the car window, the cattle prod, and fireworks. They laughed about it. it. But there was truth behind the jokes. Real truth that hurt his career more than any opponent ever could. His ego got in the way. When he first arrived in WWE in 2003, he had a chip on his shoulder. People backstage said he didn't try to work with talent openly. He wasn't collaborative. He wasn't willing to adapt. That attitude hurt him. WWE didn't trust him. They relied on guys like Triple H instead. Guys they could control. Guys who would stick around. Goldberg was seen as a short-timer who might hold up the company for more money. So even when he won matches, he lost politically. The whispers started immediately. He's difficult. He's stubborn. He won't listen. He thinks he knows better than everyone. These whispers became louder. They became problems. They became reasons why WWE wouldn't fully commit to him. Every meeting became tense. Every creative discussion became an argument. Goldberg wanted things his way. WWE wanted their way. Nobody won. Then there were the physical mistakes, the self-inflicted injuries. The most famous one happened when he punched through a limousine window. He shattered the glass. He also shattered his arm. Blood everywhere. Damage everywhere. It was unnecessary. It was reckless. And it cost him time and credibility. Fans saw the images. They saw him bleeding. They wondered why someone so tough couldn't control his anger. Why he would hurt himself over nothing. He also had problems with weapons, cattle prods, fireworks. Things that shouldn't have been issues became huge problems. His body betrayed him. His temperament betrayed him. His consistency wasn't there. Match after match, something went wrong. Not always big things, but little things. Timing issues, communication problems. Moments where you could see he wasn't comfortable, wasn't ready, wasn't as good as people believed. The worst moment? The kick that ended Bret Hart's career. We'll get to that later. But that single mistake defined how many people saw Goldberg as someone who couldn't control himself, someone who was dangerous in the wrong ways. Critics said he was the absolute worst in the ring, that botching a simple strike to the point of ending another wrestler's career proved it. Goldberg himself admitted he was young in the business. He said people make mistakes, but that mistake was permanent. By the time he returned years later, something changed. He was reportedly more humble, more willing to listen, more open to working with others. That growth was real, but it came too late for his first run. For years, Goldberg fought himself more than anyone else. And for years, he lost that fight. That's why his own limitations rank as the 10th toughest rival, because they followed him everywhere. Every match, every backstage meeting, every moment in the spotlight. The enemy within was always there. Number 9, The Rock. When Goldberg jumped to WWE in 2003, he needed instant credibility. WCW was dead. WWE was the only game left. And WWE fans didn't care about his streak. They didn't care about his 73 wins. They needed proof. So WWE gave him The Rock, the biggest star in the company, a man who had just finished feuds with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker, a legend, an icon, a guy with unmatched charisma. The Rock was everything Goldberg wasn't. Smooth on the microphone, funny, charismatic, comfortable in long matches, good at promos, good at comedy, good at drama. He could do it all. Goldberg could do two things: spear and jackhammer. That was it. Putting them together was fascinating. Would The Rock expose Goldberg's weaknesses? Would Goldberg's intensity overwhelm The Rock's flash? The Rock's toughness came from what he represented. He was the test. Could Goldberg hang with WWE's elite? Could he transition from WCW to WWE without losing his aura? Beating The Rock answered those questions. It gave Goldberg immediate validation. It bridged the gap between his past and his future. The Rock didn't need to win. He didn't need to look strong. His star power was so high that just facing him elevated Goldberg. That's charisma. That's value. That's what made The Rock special. But here's the thing. The Rock exposed something too. Goldberg needed that validation. He couldn't just walk into WWE and dominate like he did in WCW. He needed The Rock's approval. He needed The Rock's star power to rub off on him. Without that first big win, Goldberg's WWE run might have died before it started. The Rock gave him life, and that dependency showed a weakness. Goldberg wasn't as bulletproof as fans thought. He needed help. He needed someone to legitimize him in this new environment. The feud also showed Goldberg's limitations on the microphone. The Rock could talk for 20 minutes and have fans hanging on every word. Goldberg struggled to talk for 2 minutes without sounding awkward. The Rock made it look easy. Goldberg made it look hard. That contrast hurt. It reminded everyone that Goldberg was a one-trick pony. Great at that one trick, but just one trick. Number 8, William Regal. This one surprised people. William Regal wasn't a monster. He wasn't a political powerhouse. He wasn't a main event guy. But in 1998, 1998, on an episode of Nitro, Regal became Goldberg's nightmare. The match was supposed to be simple. Goldberg squashes Regal. Quick finish. Move on. But Regal had other plans. He used complex mat grappling, chain wrestling, technical skill. He forced Goldberg into a longer match. He forced Goldberg to wrestle. Really wrestle. Fans watching saw something they hadn't seen before. Goldberg struggling. Goldberg looking lost. Goldberg unable to hit his moves cleanly. Regal literally forced him to have a great match. But it wasn't great because Goldberg was good. It was great because Regal carried him. Regal exposed his greenness, his lack of technical ability, his reliance on power moves. Every hold Regal applied looked smooth. Every counter looked natural. Every transition looked professional. Meanwhile, Goldberg looked stiff, uncomfortable, out of place. Eric Bischoff was furious. He said Regal made Goldberg look awful, and he was right. This was supposed to be a showcase, a quick win to keep the streak going. Instead, it became an exposure. Fans who watched closely started asking questions. Can Goldberg actually wrestle? Does he know what he's doing? Is this whole thing just smoke and mirrors? Those questions were dangerous. They threatened the entire formula. The political fallout was severe. Regal got heat backstage. People accused him of trying to sabotage the rising star, of trying to undermine the company's biggest moneymaker. WCW protected Goldberg at all costs. They needed the monster gimmick to stay intact. Technical proficiency didn't matter. Following the script mattered. Keeping the cash cow safe mattered. So Regal got punished, and Goldberg learned a lesson. Technical wrestlers were dangerous. They could make him look bad. They could force him into situations he wasn't ready for. Years later, both men still had tension. Goldberg said he'd love to scrap with Regal. Regal said Goldberg blamed him publicly. The bitterness remained, because that one match proved something important. Goldberg's formula had limits. Technical skill was a hard counter, and if someone forced him off script, he couldn't adapt. He couldn't adjust. He couldn't think on his feet. That's why William Regal ranks as the 8th toughest rival. He exposed the truth. And the truth hurt. Number 7, Scott Steiner. Steiner was different. He wasn't political like Nash. He wasn't technical like Regal. He wasn't symbolic like Sting. Steiner was pure aggression, unpredictable, intense, stiff. He brought legitimate physicality to every match. And when he faced Goldberg, he didn't hold back. He refused to simplify his approach. He forced Goldberg into contests of raw strength, of real athletic aggression. It was volatile. It was dangerous. It was exactly what made Steiner tough. Fans who ranked Goldberg's top opponents always mentioned Steiner. They knew his reputation. They knew he pushed boundaries. In the late WCW run, when everything was falling apart, Steiner was still bringing maximum intensity. He made Goldberg work. He made Goldberg prove himself physically, not with moves, not with finishers, with pure force. That's a different kind of challenge. That's a different kind of rival. Steiner's toughness came from unpredictability. You never knew what he would do. You never knew how stiff he'd get. Would he follow the script? Would he go into business for himself? Would he hurt someone? These questions made every match with Steiner dangerous. Goldberg had to be ready for anything, and that constant state of alertness, that need to match Steiner's intensity, made every encounter difficult. Steiner didn't care about politics. He didn't care about scripts. He cared about winning the physical battle. And against Goldberg, those battles were always hard-fought. Both men were former athletes. Both had legitimate strength. Both refused to look weak. So when they collided, it was real as wrestling gets. The punches landed harder. The throws had more force. The intensity was higher, and Goldberg had to match it or risk looking soft. Number 6, Sting. This rivalry should have been bigger. Sting and Goldberg were WCW's 2 biggest homegrown stars. Sting represented the past, the foundation, the legend. Goldberg represented the future, the aggression, the new era. When they faced each other, it was symbolic. It was a passing of the torch moment, or at least it should have been. Sting's toughness came from his mystique. He had an undefeated aura of his own. He had charisma, star power, credibility. Fans believed he could have ended Goldberg's streak cleanly. He was one of only a few people who had that believability. Diamond Dallas Page had it. Scott Steiner had it. Sting had it. That's rare. That's valuable. Goldberg couldn't just steamroll Sting. It wouldn't have made sense. Sting was too big, too important, too beloved, but WCW botched it. Their matches felt rushed, mishandled. The booking never gave them time to build properly. Fans wanted a slow burn. They wanted months of anticipation. They wanted promos. They wanted stare downs. They wanted the clash to feel important. Instead, WCW threw them together quickly. The matches happened. Then they were over. No real story, no real meaning, just 2 big names colliding because they could. The potential was there. The clash of 2 unbeatable forces. The question of who would win, the symbolic weight of old versus new. But the execution failed. Still, the potential alone made Sting a benchmark. Goldberg was always measured against him. Fans always wondered who would win in a fair fight. That question, that curiosity, that symbolic weight made Sting the sixth toughest rival. Not because of what happened, because of what could have happened. Because in wrestling, sometimes what could have been matters as much as what was. Number 5, Bret Hart. This one hurts. Bret Hart's status as a rival isn't about competition, it's about consequence. In 1999, Goldberg delivered a stiff kick to Hart's head. The concussion was severe. It ended Hart's career, one of the greatest technical wrestlers of all time, forced to retire because of one mistake, one kick, one moment of sloppiness. The scrutiny was overwhelming. Critics tore Goldberg apart. They said botching a simple strike to the point of ending someone's career proved how bad he was in the ring. The quote was harsh, the absolute worst in the ring, and Goldberg felt it. He expressed deep remorse. He admitted he was young. He said people make mistakes. But this wasn't a normal mistake. This was career-ending. This was life-changing. This was permanent. Hart's toughness came from the burden he placed on Goldberg's legacy. It wasn't about wins. It wasn't about titles. It was about guilt, about responsibility, about living with the fact that his recklessness hurt someone permanently. Among peers and fans, this incident became a stain that never washed away. Goldberg could win 100 more matches. It wouldn't matter. He ended Bret Hart's career. That's what people remembered. That's what haunted him. The wrestling community never forgot. They brought it up constantly, every time Goldberg returned, every time he had a match. Every time someone interviewed him, the Bret Hart kick came up. It became part of his story, part of his identity. The guy who ended the hitman's career, not on purpose, not with malice, but through carelessness, through being too green, through not knowing better. That's why Hart ranks as the 5th toughest rival, because the pain was moral, professional, personal, and eternal. Goldberg couldn't escape it, couldn't fix it, couldn't make it right. Hart's career was over. Nothing could change that. And every day, Goldberg had to live with that knowledge, that weight, that guilt. No opponent in the ring ever hurt him like that hurt did. Number 4, Triple H. During Goldberg's first WWE run, Triple H was the gatekeeper. He led Evolution, he controlled the World Heavyweight Championship scene, and he made it clear Goldberg wasn't welcome. This wasn't just in ring competition. This was corporate, political, systemic. Triple H represented everything Goldberg had to overcome just to exist in WWE's main event structure. The backstage politics shaped everything. Management saw Triple H as loyal, controllable, a long-term investment. Goldberg was the opposite, a short-timer, someone who might leave for more money, someone who didn't play the game. So when it came time to make decisions, WWE sided with Triple H. Even when Goldberg won matches, the power stayed with Evolution. The resistance stayed strong. Evolution was everywhere. Triple H, Ric Flair, Randy Orton, Batista, they controlled Raw. They controlled the title picture. They controlled creative. And they didn't want Goldberg there. Every week, they found ways to undermine him, to make him look bad, to chip away at his aura. It was death by 1,000 cuts. No single moment destroyed him, but every week, another small loss, another small embarrassment, another reminder that this wasn't his company. Their feud culminated at Unforgiven in 2003. Goldberg finally overcame months of interference, months of mind games, months of strategic barriers. He beat Triple H. He captured the World Heavyweight Championship. It should have been a moment of triumph, a celebration, the monster conquering the system. But what happened next showed the real problem. After losing to Triple H at Armageddon later that year, Goldberg was seen in the locker room throwing items, yelling, swearing. Triple H confronted him backstage, asked if there was a problem. Goldberg's demeanor changed. He thanked Triple H for the match. Then he left. The next day, he was suspended. That tells you everything. Goldberg couldn't control his emotions. He couldn't navigate the politics. He couldn't win the real battle. Triple H did. Triple H stayed. Triple H thrived. Goldberg left. Triple H's toughness wasn't just physical, it was organizational. He mobilized resistance. He turned the entire system against Goldberg. And in the end, the system won. That's why Triple H ranks as the 4th toughest rival, because beating him in a match wasn't enough. You had to beat the entire power structure. And Goldberg couldn't do that. He didn't have the patience. He didn't have the political skills. He didn't have the willingness to play the game. So he lost, not in the ring, but where it mattered more. Backstage, in the offices, in the meetings. That's where Triple H was unbeatable. Number 3, Diamond Dallas Page. DDP was the opposite of everything Goldberg faced with Triple H or Nash. He wasn't political. He wasn't using backstage influence. He was just better in the ring, at psychology, at storytelling, at making Goldberg look good while also looking like a real threat himself. Their match at Halloween Havoc in 1998 is called the best match of Goldberg's career. Unanimously, no debate. DDP forced Goldberg into a long, high-quality contest. He made him wrestle, he made him sell, he made him struggle. For the first time, fans saw Goldberg in danger, real danger, not from weapons, not from interference, from a better wrestler. DDP controlled the pace, he dictated the story, he made Goldberg work harder than he ever had before, and the result was magic. DDP hit the diamond cutter. It almost ended the streak cleanly. That moment was huge. It validated DDP as a credible challenger. It showed Goldberg could be vulnerable. It proved that with the right opponent, Goldberg could have great matches. Not just quick squashes, great matches. Matches people talked about, matches people remembered, matches that elevated both men instead of just one. But here's the frustrating part. WCW didn't learn the lesson. Analysts point out that DDP proved Goldberg could be elevated in sustained high-quality matches. He proved the formula could work beyond 3-minute squashes. Yet WCW pivoted away from this feud. They chose Kevin Nash instead. They chose the cattle prod angle. They chose controversy over quality. If WCW had focused on maximizing the DDP rivalry, everything changes. If they had given him the title shot at Starrcade instead of Nash, Goldberg's career would have been different, better. He would have gained the sustained main event depth he needed. He would have learned to work longer matches. He would have developed the skills that could have extended his career. Instead, he got political backlash and damaged credibility. DDP's toughness came from skill, from craft, from understanding how to make both men look great. He didn't need weapons. He didn't need interference. He just needed a microphone and a ring. And in that environment, he was Goldberg's toughest stylistic test. That's why he ranks third, because he showed what Goldberg could be and what WCW refused to let him become. Number 2, Kevin Nash. Nash didn't beat Goldberg with skill. He didn't beat him with physicality. He beat him with politics. And that was somehow worse. At Starrcade in 1998, Nash ended the streak. 173-0 became 173-1. The method? Scott Hall interference, a cattle prod, a controversial finish that people still debate today. The decision to break the streak was purely political. Nash had backstage influence. He was part of the New World Order era. He had power, and he used that power to orchestrate the most bankable storyline in WCW history coming to an end. The controversial finish set the stage for the finger poke of doom just days later. Many critics cite that moment as the beginning of WCW's decline. Nash's streak ending wasn't about competition. It wasn't about proving he was better. It was about control, about power, about making sure the right people stayed on top. Nash was part of the old guard, the established stars, the guys who ran things. Goldberg was new, young, threatening. He could have taken over, could have become the face of WCW for the next decade. Nash couldn't allow that. The cattle prod became a symbol, a joke, a reminder that Goldberg's streak didn't end because someone was better. It ended because someone had more power. Fans felt cheated. They wanted a real finish. They wanted someone to beat Goldberg clean, to prove they were tougher, to earn the victory. Instead, they got interference, weapons, politics, everything wrestling fans hate. That's what made Nash so tough. He wasn't a physical threat. He was a political one. He could change the direction of the entire company. He could decide when and how Goldberg's dominance ended. And he chose the worst possible way, a way that protected himself, a way that damaged Goldberg, a way that hurt WCW long-term. Nash wielded backstage influence like a weapon. And against that weapon, Goldberg had no defense. You can train to fight. You can't train to fight politics. That's why Kevin Nash ranks as the second toughest rival, because he proved that in wrestling, political power beats physical power every time. And Goldberg never recovered from that lesson. The streak was over, the aura was damaged, and nothing was ever the same. Number 1, Brock Lesnar. This is the rivalry, the definitive one, the one that spanned 2 eras, the one that tested Goldberg in every possible way: physical, mental, professional, legacy. Brock Lesnar is Goldberg's arch nemesis. No debate, no question, no rival comes close. It started in 2004 at WrestleMania 20. Both men were leaving WWE. Fans knew it. The crowd turned on them. The match was terrible, underwhelming, forgettable. For years, that's how people remembered Goldberg versus Lesnar: as a failure, as a disappointment, as proof that hype doesn't always deliver. Both men left wrestling with that stain on their records, that embarrassment, that reminder of what could have been. But then something changed. 2016, Goldberg returned after 12 years. His opponent, Brock Lesnar, the Beast incarnate, the most dominant force in WWE, the man who ended The Undertaker's WrestleMania streak, the man who destroyed everyone. Nobody expected Goldberg to win. Nobody. Lesnar was younger, stronger, more active. Goldberg was 50, retired, out of shape. It seemed like a mismatch. But at Survivor Series, Goldberg hit 2 spears and a jackhammer. Under 3 minutes, done. Lesnar lost. The upset was gargantuan, shocking, unbelievable. Fans couldn't process what they just saw. The Beast fell, the unbeatable machine got squashed, and Goldberg, the nostalgia act, did it. That moment was critical. It re-established Goldberg's credibility instantly. He wasn't just a nostalgia act. He was a legitimate threat. The Beast fell, and Goldberg was the one who made it happen. WWE finally understood. They finally embraced the WCW monster formula. Quick, dominant, overwhelming. In 2003, WWE didn't want Goldberg to destroy their guys. They wanted competitive matches, long matches. That killed his momentum. But in 2016, they let him be himself, and it worked. Fans went crazy. Social media exploded. Everyone was talking about Goldberg again. The rivalry continued. Goldberg won the Universal Championship. Lesnar wanted revenge. The rematch was set. At WrestleMania 33, they had their final battle. This time it was different. It was brutal, hard-hitting, real. Lesnar hit multiple German suplexes. Goldberg hit a spear through the barricade. Back and forth. Power versus power. Monster versus monster. The intensity was incredible. Every move looked devastating. Every strike looked like it hurt. Both men were giving everything. No holding back. No playing it safe. This was the match they should have had in 2004. This was the redemption. Finally, Lesnar hit the F5. He won. Clean. Decisive. It was over. But both men walked away looking strong, looking legitimate, looking like the monsters they were supposed to be. But here's what made Lesnar the toughest rival. He didn't just beat Goldberg, he validated him. In 2004, they failed together. In 2016 and 17, they succeeded together. Lesnar was presented as Goldberg's physical equal. That's rare. That's special. Most opponents either got squashed or won dirty. Lesnar was different. He could squash Goldberg. Goldberg could squash him. They were the same level, the same tier, the same type of monster. Lesnar forced Goldberg to prove himself in the modern era, to show he could still go, to show the formula still worked. And Goldberg did. He proved it. But it cost him. The physical toll, the mental pressure, the expectation. Lesnar pushed him harder than anyone, made him dig deeper than anyone, made him question whether he still had it. And in the end, both men walked away with their legacies intact. That's the mark of a true rivalry. When both competitors are elevated, when both are remembered, when both are legends. Brock Lesnar is Goldberg's #1 toughest rival because he was everything. Physical threat, career-defining opponent, redemption arc, legacy validation, arch nemesis. In 2 matches separated by over a decade, Lesnar proved he was the only contemporary superstar who could stand toe-to-toe with Goldberg and be considered an equal. Not a victim, not a political enemy, an equal. That's why he's #1. That's why he always will be. So there you have it. 10 rivals. 10 different types of toughness. Each one tested something different. Each revealed something new. Each proved that dominance isn't simple. You can have a 173 win streak and still face real adversity. You can squash opponents in seconds and still have weaknesses. You can be the monster and still be vulnerable. Looking back now, those rivals weren't just obstacles. They were necessary. DDP proved Goldberg could have great long matches. Regal exposed areas for improvement. Nash showed the dangers of politics. Triple H revealed the corporate battles. Hart created the moral weight. Sting provided the symbolic benchmark. Steiner demanded physical intensity. Rock gave WWE validation. And Lesnar delivered the ultimate test across 2 eras. Without these rivals, Goldberg would just be a guy who won a lot. With them, he became something more. A character with depth, a performer with range, a legend with complexity. Yes, he struggled with ego. Yes, he made mistakes. Yes, he had limitations. But he also grew. His later return showed humility, maturity, a willingness to learn. That growth came from facing tough rivals, from losing sometimes, from being exposed, from being challenged. In the end, that's what sports entertainment is about. Not just winning, not just dominance, but the quality of the opposition, the complexity of the challenges, the depth of the story. Goldberg's 10 toughest rivals gave his career meaning. They forced him to be better. They revealed his character. They created moments fans still talk about decades later. The streak was impressive. The spear was devastating. The jackhammer was iconic. But the rivals were what made it all matter. Jim Cornette names 10 wrestlers he can't stand. Jim Cornette has no filter, and when it comes to these 10 wrestlers, he completely loses his mind. Some might call him old school, others say he's stuck in the past. But one thing is clear, when Cornette hates someone, everyone knows it. These aren't just casual dislikes. These are deep, burning feuds that have lasted years. Some are about wrestling style, others are about backstage incidents. A few are about the very soul of the business itself. So why do these names drive him so mad? Let's go one by one. 10. Effie. Let's start with a name that represents everything Cornette thinks is wrong with modern independent wrestling. Effie is a wrestler who brings theater and counterculture presentation to the ring. For Cornette, this is a complete betrayal of what wrestling should be. Wrestling is supposed to look like a real fight. It's supposed to make you believe two people actually hate each other. When you add excessive theatricality, you destroy that illusion. Cornette sees Effie as someone who mocks the very idea of wrestling as legitimate combat. Instead of presenting himself as a tough fighter, Effie leans into performance art. He treats the ring like a stage for cultural expression rather than athletic competition. This violates Cornette's core belief that wrestlers should look and act like they could hurt you in a real fight. The problem isn't just Effie himself, it's what he represents. Cornette believes that when wrestlers prioritize entertainment over believability, they're telling the audience the whole thing is fake. They're breaking the sacred rule of kayfabe, the idea that wrestling should maintain its illusion even when everyone knows it's scripted. When you present wrestling as pure theater, you lose the edge that makes it special. Effie's style appeals to a modern audience that doesn't care about old school rules. They want something different, something expressive, something that breaks boundaries. But to Cornette, breaking those boundaries means destroying the foundation. You can't have professional wrestling without the pretense of real conflict. Without that, you just have people doing moves with no emotional weight. This criticism extends beyond just one performer. Cornette uses Effie as shorthand for an entire movement in independent wrestling, a movement that values self-expression over selling, that prioritizes being different over being believable, that cares more about social media reactions than protecting the business. For Cornette, this is the death of everything he spent his career building. 9. Shinsuke Nakamura. Nakamura presents an interesting case because Cornette actually recognizes his talent. He admits Nakamura has ability and charisma, but that doesn't mean he likes what Nakamura represents or how his career has been handled. The criticism here is twofold. It's about style and about mismanagement. First, let's talk about strong style. Nakamura became famous for his hard-hitting Japanese wrestling approach. Cornette has problems with this style because he sees it as prioritizing stiff strikes over psychology. In traditional American wrestling, every move tells a story. You build to big moments. You make the audience care about each strike by using them sparingly. Strong style throws that out the window. It's strike after strike after strike until everything blends together. Cornette believes that when you hit too hard too often, you devalue the impact. A big strike should feel special. It should make the crowd gasp. But if you're delivering knockout blows every 30 seconds, nothing feels important anymore. The audience becomes numb to it. They stop reacting because they've seen the same level of intensity for the past 10 minutes straight. The second part of Cornette's Nakamura critique is about WWE's handling of him. When Nakamura came to WWE, he had massive buzz. He was seen as a huge signing from New Japan, but WWE didn't know what to do with him. They watered down his character. They gave him weird storylines. They failed to capitalize on what made him special in Japan. Cornette blames WWE for mismanaging Nakamura's charisma and presentation. Here's a guy who could have been a massive star in America. Instead, he became just another guy on the roster. His matches lost their edge. His character became confusing. The company took someone with genuine mystique and turned him into a joke. This frustrates Cornette because it proves his point about modern wrestling. Companies don't understand how to build stars anymore. They don't know how to protect special qualities. They take someone unique and sand down all the interesting parts until they fit a generic mold. Nakamura could have been special in America. Instead, he became another example of wasted potential. The Nakamura situation also highlights how Japanese and American wrestling philosophies clash. What works in one country doesn't always translate to another. Cornette believes that good wrestling is universal. It's about making people believe and care. But WWE tried to force Nakamura into a style that didn't suit him while also taking away what made him work. The result satisfied no one. 8. Adam Page. Adam Page, who Cornette mockingly calls Hangnail, represents everything wrong with AEW's approach to building champions. Page was positioned as a major star in AEW. He won the World Championship. He was supposed to be a top guy, but Cornette sees him as completely underwhelming. The first problem is that Page doesn't look like a champion. In Cornette's world, champions should be larger than life. They should walk into a room and command respect. They should have physiques that make you believe they could beat anyone. Page looks like a regular guy. He doesn't have the presence. He doesn't have the intimidation factor. He's just some dude in wrestling trunks. But the bigger issue is who helped build Page up, the Elite. Page was closely associated with the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega. He was part of their group. He benefited from their booking power. To Cornette, this makes Page's championship reign illegitimate. He didn't earn it through traditional means. He got it because his friends were in charge. This touches on Cornette's hatred of nepotism in politics and wrestling. He believes championships should go to the best performers who can draw money, not to people who are buddies with the bookers, not to people who are part of the cool kids club. When you give titles based on backstage relationships, you devalue the entire system. Page also represents the modern cosplay champion mentality that Cornette despises. These are wrestlers who dress up like champions and get called champions, but don't actually act like champions. They don't carry themselves with the necessary gravitas. They don't make the title feel important. They just wear the belt and do their regular matches. The nickname Hangnail itself is telling. A hangnail is a minor annoyance. It's not a real problem, just something slightly irritating that you want to get rid of. That's how Cornette sees Page, as a minor talent elevated far beyond his abilities. Someone who wouldn't have gotten anywhere near a world title in a properly run promotion. Cornette also criticizes Page for being coddled by the Elite. Instead of being pushed to improve and develop, Page was protected. He was given easy opponents. He was booked to look good regardless of his actual performance. This kind of treatment creates weak champions who can't handle real pressure or competition. The Page situation exemplifies AEW's broader problems in Cornette's eyes. The company is run by wrestlers who put their friends over regardless of merit. They care more about having fun and booking themselves than building a legitimate wrestling promotion. Page is just one example of this flawed system in action. 7. Brandon Cutler. If you want to understand Cornette's disdain for AEW's lower card, look no further than Brandon Cutler. Cornette calls him Brandon Cutlet, a name that reduces him from a person to a piece of meat. This isn't just an insult. It's a statement about Cutler's value to the wrestling business. Cutler represents amateur hour. He's someone who would have never made it past training in the old territory system. He doesn't have the look. He doesn't have the talent. He doesn't have the charisma. In a properly run promotion, he'd be working local shows and hoping for a tryout. In AEW, he's on national television. Cornette uses Cutler as a symbol of everything wrong with AEW's hiring practices. Instead of recruiting the best athletes and performers, AEW hires friends of the elite. They hire people from the independent scene, regardless of whether they're ready for prime time. The result is a roster full of wrestlers who look like they're playing wrestler rather than being wrestlers. The Cutlet nickname specifically refers to how disposable Cutler is. Ayo, Cutlet is a cheap piece of meat. It's not a premium steak. It's not something special. It's filler. That's exactly how Cornette sees Cutler's role. He's filler on a wrestling card that should feature real stars. Cutler's presence on AEW television actively hurts the product in Cornette's view. When you put someone clearly not ready for that level on screen, you tell the audience this is minor league. You signal that your standards are low. You make people question whether they should take your promotion seriously. This criticism extends beyond Cutler personally to the entire philosophy that allowed him to be hired. AEW operates on an inclusive model where independent wrestlers get chances they wouldn't get elsewhere. Cornette sees this as rewarding mediocrity. In his world, wrestling should be exclusive. Only the best should make it. Everyone else should be told to improve or find another career. The fact that Cutler became a recurring character and even got storyline attention proves Cornette's point about AEW's backwards priorities. Instead of building up legitimate stars, they waste time on wrestlers who will never draw money. They treat everyone as equally valuable when they clearly aren't. 6. Kevin Owens. The Kevin Owens situation is personal for Cornette because they worked together during Owens' developmental years. Back then, Owens was Kevin Steen, and Cornette had major problems with him. Those problems still fuel Cornette's criticism today, even though Owens became a major WWE star. The biggest issue was always Owens' weight and conditioning. Cornette believed that Owens didn't have the physical appearance of a main event wrestler. He was overweight. He didn't look athletic. He didn't present himself as someone who could legitimately beat trained fighters. In Cornette's traditional view, this disqualified Owens from top-level success. Cornette pushed Owens hard to improve his conditioning. He told him repeatedly that his weight was holding him back. He argued that if Owens would just get in better shape, he could be a much bigger star. But Owens didn't comply with these demands. He kept working at his own pace and in his own way. This created a fundamental clash over authority and respect. Cornette saw Owens' refusal to change as disrespectful to the business. In the old days, if a veteran or booker told you to lose weight, you lost weight. There was no debate. But Owens represented a new generation that questioned traditional authority. He wanted to succeed on his own terms. The conflict also involved creative disagreements and attitude issues. Cornette felt Owens challenged his booking decisions and authority in ways that were unprofessional. Owens, meanwhile, likely felt Cornette's approach was outdated and limiting. This backstage tension made their working relationship difficult. What really bothers Cornette is that Owens succeeded despite ignoring his advice. Owens became a multi-time world champion in WWE. He main evented major shows. He proved that you could be a top star without fitting Cornette's physical ideal. This success makes Cornette's years of criticism look wrong. Rather than admit he was mistaken, Cornette has doubled down. He still insists that Owens would be even better if he'd listened. He argues that Owens' weight still limits him. He continues pointing out every perceived flaw as proof that his original assessment was correct. It's become a retroactive attempt to protect his own legacy. The Owens story represents a changing wrestling business that left Cornette behind. The old standards about how wrestlers should look no longer apply. Fans care more about talent and character than physique. Owens proved you can succeed without following traditional rules. For Cornette, this is evidence the business has lost its way. 5. Santino Marella. The Santino Marella incident is the most direct example of Cornette's old-school discipline methods, destroying his career in the modern era. This wasn't a podcast feud or public criticism. This was a physical confrontation that got Cornette fired from WWE developmental. The incident happened in Ohio Valley Wrestling, where Cornette was head booker. Santino Marella was still Johnny Gio Basco back then, just a developmental trainee. During a segment involving the Boogeyman, Marella allegedly laughed or reacted improperly. This might seem minor, but to Cornette it was a cardinal sin. In professional wrestling, protecting the illusion is everything. When you're backstage or in the middle of a show, you don't break character. You don't laugh at things that are supposed to be serious. You treat the performance as real even when you're off camera. This is how wrestling maintained its mystique for decades. Cornette saw Marella's behavior as a complete violation of these unwritten rules. He believed Marella was disrespecting the business and the Boogeyman's character. In Cornette's mind, this couldn't stand. So he used an old-school method of discipline. He slapped Marella backstage. In the territory days, this kind of physical discipline was common. Veterans would rough up rookies who stepped out of line. It was how the business policed itself and maintained standards. Cornette applied this historical method in a modern corporate environment. The result was immediate disaster. WWE fired Cornette over the incident. The company had zero tolerance for physical violence, even in the name of teaching respect. Marella, the trainee who'd been slapped, was quickly signed to the main roster. Paul Heyman replaced Cornette in developmental. The message was clear. The old ways were dead. This incident taught Cornette that he could no longer enforce the standards he believed in. The corporate wrestling world had different rules. Physical discipline was assault. Traditional methods were illegal. The rookies he wanted to teach now had more power than he did. This fundamental power shift helped push him out of active promotion and into criticism. The bitterness persists because of what happened after. Marella became Santino Marella and had a successful WWE career. He was positioned as a comedy character and got significant television time. Years later, Cornette believes Marella fabricated or exaggerated stories about him, including a claim that Cornette called to gloat about an injury. For Cornette, the Santino situation represents everything wrong with modern wrestling's corporate structure. In trying to maintain professional standards through traditional discipline, he was punished. The person who violated those standards was rewarded with a main roster contract. The system favored unprofessionalism over accountability. 4. Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley, who Cornette calls Plumber Moxley, might be Cornette's most intensely hated active wrestler. The criticism is vicious and personal, going far beyond simple disagreements about wrestling style. Cornette sees Moxley as a complete failure on multiple levels. The first issue is appearance and conditioning. Cornette constantly criticizes how Moxley looks. He doesn't think Moxley maintains the physical conditioning required of a top star. He says Moxley looks sloppy, out of shape, and unprofessional. The Plumber nickname suggests Moxley looks looks like a working-class tradesman rather than an elite athlete. But the appearance criticism is just the surface. The deeper problem is Moxley's in-ring style. Moxley built his post-WWE career on hardcore wrestling. Lots of blood, weapons, and brutal brawling. For Cornette, this is the laziest possible approach to wrestling. It's violence without psychology. It's gore without storytelling. Cornette argues that Moxley uses hardcore elements as a substitute for actual wrestling ability. Instead of building matches through logical sequences and emotional investment, Moxley just bleeds and hits people with objects. There's no craft to it, no skill required, just mindless violence that any untrained person could do. This ties into Cornette's broader hatred of deathmatch wrestling. He sees it as unprofessional and destructive. Wrestlers are shortening their careers and damaging their bodies for meaningless shock value. They're not creating compelling drama or making money long term. They're just engaging in self-destruction that the audience gets bored of quickly. What makes the Moxley situation especially frustrating for Cornette is that Moxley had a better path available. He was Dean Ambrose in WWE. He was in The Shield. He was a main event player in the biggest wrestling company in the world. He could have stayed there and been a traditional star. Instead, Moxley left WWE for AEW and the independent scene. He deliberately chose hardcore wrestling over the mainstream model. He embraced the outlaw mud show style that Cornette despises. This was a conscious decision to downgrade from professional wrestling to amateurish violence. Cornette sees this choice as an indictment of Moxley's character and intelligence. Why would a talented performer with mainstream success choose to become a hardcore wrestler? Why would you voluntarily destroy your body and credibility? To Cornette, it suggests either stupidity or mental problems. The personal attacks on Moxley go beyond professional criticism. Cornette has suggested Moxley needs mental evaluation rather than rehabilitation. He questions Moxley's judgment and decision-making ability. These aren't just critiques of wrestling style, they're attacks on Moxley as a person. Moxley represents everything Cornette hates about modern wrestling in one package. He's someone with legitimate talent who rejected traditional professionalism. He chose violence over psychology. He embraced an unprofessional aesthetic. He succeeded despite violating every rule Cornette holds sacred. His prominence proves the business has lost its way. 3. Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega is interesting because Cornette admits he has talent. Omega is athletic, he has a good look, he can perform impressive moves, but none of that matters because his style embodies everything Cornette thinks is wrong with modern wrestling. Cornette sees Omega as a video game wrestler, someone who treats wrestling like a fighting game instead of a real combat sport. Omega's matches are full of flashy moves and complicated sequences. Everything looks choreographed. Nothing feels like an actual fight between two people who hate each other. The problem with the video game approach is that it destroys believability. When wrestling looks too much like a predetermined performance, it breaks the fundamental illusion. The audience can't suspend their disbelief when they're watching something that's obviously fake. You need at least some pretense of reality to make the drama work. Omega's style prioritizes spectacle over substance. His matches are designed to look cool and generate social media buzz. They're meant to be impressive displays of athleticism, but they don't tell compelling stories. They don't build emotional investment. They're just athletic exhibitions with wrestling moves. This connects to Cornette's broader critique of the elite's influence on modern wrestling. Omega, along with the Young Bucks, popularized a style that values acrobatics over psychology. They proved you could be successful without following traditional wrestling rules. This success has influenced an entire generation of wrestlers who imitate their approach. Cornette believes Omega hurt AEW's credibility by being prominently featured. When your top stars wrestle in a style that looks fake and choreographed, you can't present your promotion as serious competition to WWE. You're essentially admitting you're something different, an alternative product for people who don't care about traditional wrestling. The tragedy, in Cornette's view, is that Omega could have been great if he'd learned proper psychology. He has the physical tools, he has the charisma, but he wasted those gifts on a style designed for YouTube clips rather than long-term storytelling. He chose to be spectacular rather than believable. Omega's success without following traditional rules is deeply threatening to Cornette's worldview. It proves that modern audiences don't necessarily want what Cornette thinks wrestling should be. They're fine with choreographed spectacle. They enjoy the video game style. This makes Cornette's entire career philosophy look outdated. 2. The Young Bucks. Matt. and Nick Jackson, known as the Young Bucks, are Cornette's most consistent modern targets. He attacks them relentlessly. Every podcast seems to feature new criticism of their wrestling style. They represent everything wrong with the independent wrestling revolution that led to AEW. The core criticism is that their matches are spot fests, endless sequences of high-risk moves performed without logic or psychology. They do super kick after super kick after super kick. They hit big moves that don't end the match. They no-sell offense to hit their own moves. The result is matches that look impressive but mean nothing. The super kick party is Cornette's favorite example of everything wrong with the Bucks. The super kick used to be a devastating finishing move. Shawn Michaels would hit one super kick and the match was over. The Young Bucks hit dozens of super kicks in a single match and nobody even stays down. They've completely destroyed the move's credibility. This devaluation extends to everything in their matches. Big moves that should end a contest become transition spots. Near falls that should create drama happen so often they become meaningless. The audience becomes numb to everything because nothing is protected or special. It's spectacle without impact. Cornette also criticizes the Bucks for never evolving. They've been wrestling the same style for over a decade. Despite getting older, gaining weight, and suffering injuries, they haven't adapted. They still try to do the same high-flying moves they did in their 20s. The result is slower, sloppier versions of their old matches. The nickname Spot Monkey refers to wrestlers who just do moves without telling stories. They're like monkeys performing tricks, impressive but meaningless. The Bucks pioneered this approach in modern wrestling. They proved you could build a career on athletic moves alone without traditional psychology. What really bothers Cornette is that the Bucks succeeded despite violating every rule he holds sacred. They became millionaires. They helped start AEW. They're executive vice presidents of a major wrestling company. They did all this by doing the exact opposite of what Cornette says wrestlers should do. The Young Bucks' success disproves Cornette's fundamental beliefs about wrestling. He always said you needed to protect your moves, you needed to sell, you needed to build matches with proper psychology. The Bucks ignored all of that and succeeded anyway. This makes Cornette's decades of teaching look wrong, but there's another layer to Cornette's hatred. The Bucks are influencing the next generation. Young wrestlers watch them and imitate their style. Instead of learning traditional fundamentals, new performers are copying the Spotfest approach. This creates a cycle where bad habits get passed down and amplified. Cornette calls this clowns influencing clowns. The Bucks learned from a generation that already deviated from proper wrestling. Now they're teaching an even worse version to people who never learned traditional basics. Each generation gets further from what wrestling should be. The Bucks are the prime example of this degradation. The Bucks also represent the triumph of the independent wrestling model over the traditional territory system. They built their careers outside the mainstream system. They didn't pay dues in developmental territories. They didn't work their way up through established companies. They created their own path and it worked. This success challenges everything Cornette built his career on. The old system required apprenticeship and respect for traditions. You learned from veterans. You worked for years before getting opportunities. The Bucks bypassed all of that. They proved you could succeed through social media buzz and independent bookings alone. One Vince Russo. Vince Russo isn't just someone Cornette dislikes. He's Cornette's arch nemesis. The hatred between them is deep, personal, and ideological. This isn't about wrestling style or backstage incidents. This is about the fundamental destruction of professional wrestling as Cornette understands it. The feud centers on completely opposite philosophies about what wrestling should be. Cornette believes wrestling must look like a real athletic contest. It needs long-term storytelling. It requires protecting the illusion of legitimacy. Every decision should serve the goal of making people believe in the product. Russo's approach, which he called Crash TV, was the exact opposite. Wrestling was just a television show. The goal was getting ratings through shock value. Long-term storytelling didn't matter if people weren't watching tonight. The whole thing was fake anyway, so why pretend otherwise? This clash played out in real time in WWF and WCW. Cornette tried to maintain traditional standards. Russo pushed for constant swerves, celebrity involvement, and storylines that exposed the business. Every creative meeting became a war between these worldviews. Eventually, Russo won and Cornette was marginalized. Cornette believes Russo personally destroyed his career multiple times. He says Russo fucked him over and ran him out of promotions. This wasn't just professional disagreement, it was active sabotage. Russo saw Cornette as a threat to his authority and systematically undermined him. The specific examples of Russo's booking philosophy enrage Cornette to this day. The most infamous is David Arquette winning the WCW championship. This was a publicity stunt designed to get mainstream media attention. It worked for that purpose, but it completely destroyed the credibility of the title. In traditional wrestling, the World Championship represents the best wrestler in the company. It has history and prestige. Fans care about who holds it because it means something. When you give it to an actor as a joke, you're telling everyone the title is meaningless. You're sacrificing long-term credibility for a short-term publicity spike. Even worse was Russo booking himself to win the WCW championship. This wasn't even a publicity stunt. It was pure ego. A non-wrestler booker with no athletic credibility made himself champion. There was no business reason for it, no financial upside, just Russo putting himself over because he could. Cornette sees this self-aggrandizement as the ultimate betrayal of wrestling principles. Bookers are supposed to be invisible. Their job is making stars and drawing money. They're not supposed to put themselves on screen, let alone make themselves champion. Russo doing this proved he cared more about his ego than the business. The damage from Russo's era still affects wrestling today. He normalized the idea that championships don't matter. He made swerves and shock value the default approach. He taught a generation of wrestlers and bookers that long-term storytelling was old-fashioned. The outlaw mud show culture Cornette hates traces directly back to Russo's influence. Russo even failed repeatedly after the initial Attitude Era success. He got a job in TNA and was so toxic they couldn't publicly acknowledge his employment. The network had problems with him. He got fired again. He proved that his approach didn't work long-term, yet his influence persists. The personal hatred between Cornette and Russo has become its own form of entertainment. They've feuded publicly for decades. Cornette has made alleged threats. They've attacked each other in shoots and interviews. This real-life conflict has become more compelling than many wrestling storylines. The irony is that Cornette, who champions kayfabe and maintaining the illusion, has built much of his modern career on a completely real, non-kayfabe feud. His hatred of Russo is genuine. It's not worked for an angle. It's authentic personal animosity that happens to be entertaining to wrestling fans. This authenticity makes the Russo feud Cornette's most successful piece of content. People tune in to hear him rant about Russo. They want to see the anger. They enjoy the real emotion. In trying to defend traditional wrestling, Cornette accidentally discovered that real hatred draws better than fake storylines. Russo represents the moment wrestling changed forever. Before him, there were standards and traditions. After him, anything went if it got attention. Cornette sees himself as the last defender of the old ways. Russo was the revolutionary who destroyed what Cornette was trying to protect. The fundamental question their feud raises is whether wrestling needs to maintain its illusion to be successful. Russo proved you could make money by admitting it's fake and prioritizing entertainment over believability. Cornette insists this approach is short-sighted and destructive. 25 years later, they're still arguing about who was right. Every other person on this list connects back to Russo in some way. The Young Bucks' Spot Fest style, that's the logical evolution of prioritizing moments over storytelling. Moxley's hardcore approach, that's the descendant of Russo's shock value philosophy. AEW's approach to championships, it traces back to Russo teaching people titles don't matter. Cornette blames Russo for creating the culture that allowed all his other targets to exist. If wrestling had maintained its traditional standards, none of these other problems would have emerged. The Young Bucks would have been told to slow down and sell. Moxley would have been taught proper psychology. AEW would have been built on legitimate competition. But Russo broke the system that enforced those standards. He proved you didn't need them to succeed. He showed that wrestling could be something different, more openly fake, more focused on shock value, more interested in television ratings than athletic credibility. That opened the door for everything Cornette hates about modern wrestling. The Russo feud is ultimately about nostalgia versus evolution. Cornette wants wrestling to return to what it was during his peak years. Russo pushed it to evolve into something new. The modern wrestling landscape suggests Russo won this war. Wrestling today looks nothing like the territorial era Cornette championed. That's why the hatred remains so intense. Cornette isn't just mad at Russo personally, he's mad that Russo's vision of wrestling defeated his own. He's mad that the business he loves was transformed into something he doesn't recognize. He's mad that he spent his career building something that was torn down by a television writer who didn't respect traditional rules. Vince Russo will forever be Jim Cornette's #1 target, not because of any single incident, but because he represents the death of traditional professional wrestling and the birth of everything Cornette can't stand about the modern business. Claude is AI and can make mistakes. Please double-check responses. He's strong. That's what The Rock said when he opened up about the 10 toughest men he ever faced inside a wrestling ring. From legitimate fighters who could break bones for real to legends who bled for the business. Some names on his list make perfect sense. Others, not so much. Because when you dig deeper into The Rock's choices, contradictions start appearing, motivations get questioned, and you begin to wonder if this list reveals more about Dwayne Johnson's ego than it does about actual toughness. Number 10, Chris Benoit. The Rock acknowledged Benoit as a legendary technician whose matches required intense physical toughness. Their bout at Fully Loaded 2000 was highly rated, pitting The Rock's brawling style against Benoit's technical precision. Benoit was known for working stiff, meaning his opponents had to be genuinely tough to absorb the impact of his moves while maintaining the pace of the match. On the surface, this seems like a straightforward pick. Benoit brought intensity and realism to every performance. But here's where things get deeply problematic. In 2007, Chris Benoit murdered his wife and son before taking his own life. His brain showed severe damage from years of concussions, leading to a tragic and horrifying end that shocked the wrestling world. WWE has since scrubbed Benoit from their history as much as possible, refusing to acknowledge his existence beyond the bare minimum required by historical record. So what does it mean that The Rock includes Benoit on his list of toughest opponents? Is he praising the in-ring performer while ignoring the human being? Is he separating the technical skill from the tragedy? The truth is, you can't talk about Benoit's toughness without confronting what that toughness cost. The stiff style, the constant head trauma, the damage that accumulated over years of matches, all of that contributed to a deteriorating brain that ended in unspeakable horror. Benoit's toughness wasn't admirable, it was destructive. It killed him and his family, and The Rock's inclusion of him on this list, without any acknowledgement of that context, suggests a troubling blindness to the real cost of the toughness he's celebrating. When you glorify someone's ability to work through pain and deliver stiff matches, you're also glorifying the very thing that may have destroyed their brain and led to tragedy. Number 9, John Cena. During an interview, The Rock praised Cena as an animal when it came to discipline and focus. He noted that no one trained harder or more consistently than Cena, that no one understood the value of diet and conditioning better. For over a decade, Cena maintained a grueling schedule while staying in peak physical condition. That kind of sustained professional excellence represents modern toughness. By The Rock's own words, Cena embodied the discipline required to succeed at the highest level. Except The Rock is leaving out a massive part of their history. During their actual feud leading up to WrestleMania 28, The Rock publicly mocked Cena. He made fun of his dedication, called him soft, questioned his toughness. The Rock played the returning legend, putting the current star in his place, using his Hollywood success as proof of his superiority. He wasn't praising Cena's discipline then. He was weaponizing it, making Cena's earnest dedication seem lame compared to The Rock's cool guy persona, and fans ate it up. But then something shifted. After their matches, after The Rock had proven he could still go in the ring when he wanted to, after he'd satisfied his own ego by beating Cena at WrestleMania, suddenly Cena became someone worth praising. Suddenly Cena's discipline was admirable instead of mockable. The hypocrisy is stunning. The Rock's definition of Cena's toughness changed based entirely on what served The Rock's image at any given moment. When he needed to look cool and effortless, Cena's work ethic was something to ridicule. When he needed to look gracious and wise, Cena's work ethic was something to celebrate. The toughness didn't change. Only The Rock's need to use it for his own purposes changed. This isn't respect, it's manipulation. Number 8, The Undertaker. The Rock called him a cornerstone of WWE, someone who delivered great matches night after night for 3 decades. Maintaining the intimidating presence of the dead man character required consistent physical excellence and psychological commitment. To stay at the main event level that long, portraying a character that fearless and imposing, demanded a unique kind of mental toughness. The Undertaker's longevity alone puts him in rare company. But here's the reality that The Rock glosses over. Most of his praise for The Undertaker came after Taker's retirement. During their actual rivalry, when they were competing for position and spotlight, the respect was far less obvious. The Rock was trying to be the next big thing. The Undertaker was the established legend protecting his territory. Their matches were professional, but the backstage dynamic was more complicated than The Rock now lets on. By praising Taker's toughness in retrospect, The Rock gets to position himself as someone who battled and learned from a legend, rather than someone who was trying to replace that legend, whether the legend liked it or not. It's easier to respect respect someone's toughness when they're no longer a threat to your spot. The Undertaker earned genuine respect through decades of consistent performance. But The Rock's acknowledgement of that respect always seems to come with perfect timing for his own narrative needs. He waited until it was safe, until Taker couldn't compete with him anymore, until the praise would make him look magnanimous rather than threatened. Number 7. Ken Shamrock. Known as the world's most dangerous man, Shamrock came from mixed martial arts with genuine combat credentials. He was stiff in the ring, meaning his moves had real force behind them. Working with Shamrock required actual toughness because you were going to get hit for real. The Rock inducted him into the Impact Hall of Fame, recognizing their legendary matches during the Attitude Era. On paper, Shamrock's inclusion makes sense. He brought legitimate fighting pedigree to professional wrestling. But notice the timing. The Rock's praise for Shamrock came years after Shamrock's WWE run ended. During Shamrock's actual time with the company, WWE never gave him full credit for his fighting background. They toned him down, made him part of the scripted show rather than the legitimate threat he could have been. And The Rock benefited from that. He got to work with someone who had real toughness without having to face the full extent of what Shamrock could actually do. Now, years later, when it's safe and convenient, The Rock mentions him as one of his toughest opponents. It's revisionist history designed to make The Rock look good by association. Shamrock was legitimately dangerous, but The Rock only acknowledged that danger after it couldn't hurt his career anymore. During their active rivalry, acknowledging Shamrock's true fighting ability might have made fans question why The Rock was winning their matches. But now it's just another tough guy The Rock conquered, another credential on his resume. Number 6. Triple H. The Rock and Triple H clashed constantly throughout the Attitude Era in Iron Man matches, ladder matches, and countless championship bouts. They were jockeying for position for years, both trying to prove they belonged at the top of the card. Triple H's toughness came from endurance, from being able to repeatedly absorb damage and return to a grueling main event style. Their feud lasted for years and demanded consistent physical excellence from both men. But here's what The Rock doesn't mention when he talks about Triple H: the politics. Triple H was notorious for protecting his spot, for using his relationship with key decision makers to ensure favorable booking. And The Rock was doing the exact same thing. Their feud wasn't just physical, it was political warfare disguised as wrestling rivalry. When The Rock praises Triple H's toughness now, he's acknowledging a fellow survivor of corporate wrestling politics, someone who learned how to play the game just as well as he did. The grinding, punishing matches they had weren't tests of toughness, they were tests of who could better manipulate the system while still delivering in the ring. Triple H's toughness was his ability to maintain his spot through relationships and savvy as much as through physical performance. And The Rock recognized that because he was doing it too. This wasn't about two warriors respecting each other's physical gifts. This was about two politicians recognizing they were using the same playbook. The praise is mutual because the methods were identical. Number 5. Stone Cold Steve Austin. The Rock describes their rivalry as the greatest in sports, entertainment history. He says they pushed each other to the limit while fighting for the #1 spot in the company. And there's truth in that. Their matches defined an era. The physicality was real, the competition intense. Austin worked through legitimate neck injuries to maintain that level of performance, calling matches old school style right there in the ring. But let's be clear about what this rivalry actually was: a war for dominance, not a friendship. The Rock frames it now as mutual respect. Two warriors pushing each other to greatness. But during that time, it was ego versus ego, star versus star, with both men fighting for creative control and main event position. The Rock wanted to be the face of WWE. Austin wanted the same thing. Neither was interested in making the other look good unless it served their own interests. So when The Rock now calls Austin one of his toughest opponents, he's technically correct. But he's also rewriting history to make it seem collaborative when it was actually cutthroat. They didn't push each other out of respect. They pushed each other out of necessity because neither would let the other win without a fight. The toughness The Rock saw in Austin wasn't admirable determination. It was a mirror reflecting his own desperate need to stay on top. Their rivalry was great for business, but it was built on competition and pride, not the mutual admiration The Rock now claims it was. Number 4. Mick Foley. Now here's where The Rock's definition of toughness gets genuinely disturbing. Their infamous I Quit match at the 1999 Royal Rumble stands as one of the most brutal contests in WWE history. The Rock hit Foley with 11 unprotected chair shots to the head. Foley's wife and children watched from ringside as their husband and father was beaten into unconsciousness. The violence was so extreme that The Rock himself later admitted it got way out of hand. People watching it years later reported feeling nauseous. So what does it say about The Rock that he he includes Foley on his toughest list? Is he praising Foley's ability to absorb punishment, or is he defending his own actions that night? Because here's the truth that makes this uncomfortable. The Rock's ambition blinded him. He was so focused on creating a memorable moment, on cementing his status as a top star, that he didn't stop swinging even when Foley was clearly hurt. He went off script and kept hitting. And now, years later, he points to Foley's toughness as if that somehow absolves him of responsibility. Foley was tough, yes. Unbelievably, tragically tough. He sacrificed his physical and mental health for the business, but The Rock's praise feels less like respect and more like justification. He's saying, look how tough Foley was, see how much he could take, as a way to avoid confronting the fact that he inflicted damage no performer should have endured. Foley's toughness became The Rock's alibi for his own recklessness. The inclusion of Foley on this list isn't an honor, it's a confession wrapped in praise. Number 3, King Tonga, better known as Haku. The Rock called his uncle legitimately one of the toughest wrestlers ever, and the stories about Haku are genuinely terrifying. He allegedly bit off a fan's nose during a bar fight. He nearly choked out Brutus Beefcake. His reputation for being dangerous backstage made him a legend among wrestlers who valued old-school toughness. The Rock confirmed many of these stories with a smile, clearly proud of the family connection. But let's address the elephant in the room: nepotism. Haku was trained by The Rock's own grandfather. He's part of the extended Anoa'i wrestling family that gave The Rock his start in the business. So when Johnson names Haku as one of his toughest opponents, how much of that is genuine assessment and how much is family obligation? Haku's toughness is built on fear and backstage stories, not athletic achievement or in-ring performance. The Rock never faced Haku during his prime. He never had to actually deal with that legendary danger when it mattered. Instead, he inherited the stories, claimed the connection, and used it to bolster his own tough guy credentials by association. It's a classic move. Align yourself with fearsome relatives, bask in their reflected glory, but never actually prove you have that same edge yourself. The Rock praised Haku because it was safe to do so, and because it reinforced the family legacy that made The Rock marketable in the first place. This isn't about respecting toughness. It's about leveraging family mythology for personal brand building. Number 2, Kurt Angle. The Rock explicitly named Angle as one of the legitimately toughest men he faced. And why wouldn't he? Angle was a 2-time NCAA Division I national champion who won gold at the 1996 Summer Olympics. His amateur wrestling background was impeccable. He famously claimed he won that gold medal with a broken neck, a statement that spoke to almost unbelievable pain tolerance and mental resolve. Angle's Olympic pedigree provides the ultimate level of credibility in combat sports. Yet here's the contradiction worth examining. The Rock praised Angle's toughness when it served his narrative, when it made him look good to align himself with Olympic excellence. But as The Rock transitioned into Hollywood, that relationship became more about public relations than genuine respect born from pain. Angle brought realism to professional wrestling through his shoot-style technique. He made matches feel legitimate. The Rock, meanwhile, was perfecting his eyebrow raise and catchphrases for a different kind of audience. By the time Angle was inducted into the Impact Hall of Fame, with The Rock doing the honors, it felt convenient. A way for Johnson to attach himself to authentic athletic achievement while he was busy making family movies. Did The Rock truly respect Angle's Olympic toughness, or did he respect what associating with that toughness did for his own image? The timing of his praise always seemed to coincide with moments when The Rock needed credibility, not when he was actively in the ring absorbing Angle's intensity. It's strategic admiration, not earned respect. Number 1, Brock Lesnar. On paper, this pick is undeniable. Lesnar won the UFC Heavyweight Championship in 2008, proving he could fight for real outside the scripted world of WWE. His physical strength became the stuff of legend. JBL once said Lesnar threw him like a child, comparing his power to an Avenger. The Rock recognized this immediately. When they met at SummerSlam 2002, Johnson made a decision that seemed noble at the time. He let Lesnar win clean, sacrificing his own typical booking protection to launch the younger star's career. But here's where things get interesting. Was this really about respect, or was it about fear? The Rock had spent years protecting his image, rarely losing cleanly to anyone. Yet with Lesnar, he didn't just lose, he deferred. Some would call it passing the torch. Others might call it getting out of the way before the real fighter exposed him. Because let's be honest, in a legitimate fight, Lesnar would destroy The Rock. And maybe Dwayne Johnson knew that. Maybe his praise for Lesnar's toughness was less about admiration and more about acknowledging a threat he couldn't actually match. The Rock built his career on charisma charisma and movie star looks. Lesnar built his own legitimate combat credentials. There's a difference, and The Rock's decision to put Lesnar over so decisively suggests he understood exactly where he stood on that spectrum. Lesnar represents everything The Rock wasn't, an actual fighter with verified combat skills. By placing him at #1 and deferring to him so completely, The Rock wasn't showing respect. He was showing recognition of his own limitations. So what does this list really tell us? 10 names, 10 different versions of toughness, and all of them serve a purpose in The Rock's carefully constructed narrative. He praises legitimate fighters like Lesnar and Angle when it gives him credibility by association. He acknowledges family connections like Haku when it reinforces his wrestling lineage. He celebrates durability warriors like Foley and Austin, while downplaying his own role in perpetuating the violence that defined their careers. He respects political survivors like Triple H because they played the same game he did. He honors legends like The Undertaker after they can no longer threaten his position. He flip-flops on Cena based on whatever narrative serves him at the moment. He includes Benoit without confronting the tragedy that toughness created. And he defers to Lesnar because the alternative would be exposing himself as less tough than he claimed. The underlying problem with this entire list is that The Rock is glorifying toughness without interrogating what toughness actually meant in the wrestling industry he came from. He's praising men who destroyed their bodies and minds for entertainment. He's celebrating a culture that valued pain, tolerance over safety, that measured worth by how much damage someone could endure. Foley's ability to take 11 chair shots to the head isn't toughness. It's a symptom of an industry that treated human beings as disposable. Benoit's stiff working style wasn't artistic integrity. It was a recipe for brain damage. The Undertaker's 30-year career performing a physically demanding character wasn't just dedication, it was a grinding toll on a human body that will have consequences for the rest of his life. And The Rock benefited from all of it. He worked with these tough guys, these durable warriors, these legitimate fighters, and he came out the other side relatively unscathed. He got to be the guy who faced the toughest competition, who survived the Attitude Era, who proved himself against legends. And then he walked away to become a movie star, while many of the men he's now praising on his toughest list dealt with the long-term consequences of that toughness. Broken bodies, chronic pain, mental health struggles, and in Benoit's case, a complete psychological breakdown. So when The Rock lists his 10 toughest opponents, what is he really saying? Is he honoring these men? Or is he using their sacrifice to burnish his own legend? Because if you look closely at his choices and the timing of his praise, patterns emerge. Every choice, every bit of praise, every acknowledgement of toughness serves a purpose in building The Rock's brand. He's the guy who faced the best and came out on top. The taxonomy of toughness The Rock uses is revealing: legitimacy, durability, intimidation, and discipline. 4 categories that measure different aspects of what made these men formidable. But there's a 5th category he never mentions: survival. Who survived the toughness test intact? Who made it through with their health, their family, their sanity? By that measure, The Rock himself might be the toughest person on this list because he's the one who figured out how to leave. Maybe that's the most cynical reading of this list. Maybe The Rock names these 10 men as his toughest opponents not because he truly respected their toughness, but because he knew he could outlast it. He could take what he learned from Angle's intensity, Lesnar's legitimacy, Austin's competitive drive, Triple H's political savvy, and Cena's discipline, and then he could leave before any of it destroyed him the way it destroyed others. Professional wrestling has always had a complicated relationship with toughness. The business rewards those who can work through pain, who never say no, who sacrifice their bodies for the show. But that same toughness often leads to shortened careers, addiction, and early deaths. The tough guys become cautionary tales as often as they become legends. And The Rock's list sits right at that intersection. He's celebrating the very qualities that may have ultimately harmed the men he's praising. Look at the criteria again: legitimacy, the ability to actually fight; durability, the ability to absorb punishment; intimidation, the reputation for being dangerous; discipline, the commitment to maintaining peak physical condition despite injury. All of these things sound positive in the abstract, but in practice they meant Foley taking unprotected chair shots. They meant Benoit's brain deteriorating from repeated concussions. They meant Austin's neck getting progressively worse while he kept working. They meant The Undertaker performing through injuries that should have ended his career years earlier. The Rock learned from all of this. He absorbed the lessons these tough guys taught him about what it took to succeed in wrestling. And then he applied those lessons in a different context, one where the physical toll was lower and the financial reward was higher. Hollywood requires discipline and work ethic, which he learned from Cena. It requires understanding politics and relationships, which he learned from Triple H. It requires projecting strength and intimidation, which he learned from Haku. Haku and The Undertaker. But it doesn't require getting hit in the head with chairs or working through broken bones or sacrificing your physical health the way wrestling did. So The Rock's list of toughest wrestlers is really a list of teachers, men who showed him what toughness looked like in wrestling, giving him the tools he needed to be tough in a different way. The irony is that by being less tough than these men in the traditional wrestling sense, by being willing to leave when the opportunity arose, The Rock ended up more successful than most of them. His toughness was knowing when to stop being tough. There's an argument that this makes The Rock smart, not cowardly, that recognizing the diminishing returns of wrestling toughness and pivoting to a career where his charisma could thrive without the physical destruction was the intelligent choice. And there's truth in that. The Rock doesn't owe wrestling his health or his life. He gave the business several years of top-tier performance, created memorable moments, and moved on before the toll became permanent. But if that's the case, then his list of toughest wrestlers takes on a different meaning. It becomes a memorial of sorts, an acknowledgement of men who either couldn't leave or wouldn't leave or didn't have the opportunities to leave that The Rock had. Lesnar is the exception. He found another venue for his toughness that respected and compensated it appropriately. But the others, they stayed in wrestling because it was what they knew, or because they loved it despite the cost, or because they didn't have Hollywood knocking on their door with franchise opportunities. The Rock's praise for their toughness, then, is complicated. It's genuine in the sense that he witnessed firsthand what these men were capable of enduring. But it's also the praise of someone looking back from a position of safety and success, someone who can afford to be generous with his respect because he's no longer competing with these men for anything. His toughness list is nostalgia filtered through survivor's guilt and strategic brand management. Consider how different this list might be if The Rock was still an active wrestler. Would he be as generous with his praise? Would he acknowledge these men's strengths so freely if they were still threats to his position? Or would he be like he was during his active career, carefully managing his image, protecting his spot, making sure that every acknowledgement of someone else's ability came with an implicit assertion of his own superiority? The timing of wrestling praise always matters. Current rivals are respected but carefully managed. Past rivals become legends we learn from. The Rock's list exists in that comfortable past tense space where he can be magnanimous without cost. He can call Brock Lesnar legitimately tough because they're not competing for the same roles anymore. He can praise Angle's Olympic pedigree because that pedigree is now decades old. He can acknowledge Haku's fearsome reputation because Haku's retired. The toughness he's celebrating is safely in the past, no longer a threat, easily converted into stories that make The Rock himself look good. This is not necessarily malicious. It's simply how the wrestling business works. Everyone protects their spot when they're active. Everyone becomes generous with praise after they've secured their legacy. The Rock is following a well-established pattern, but recognizing the pattern doesn't make it less calculated. His list of toughest wrestlers is curated. It's designed. It serves specific purposes in maintaining his brand as someone who faced the best, learned from the best, and surpassed the best. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we shouldn't expect genuine, unfiltered honesty from someone whose entire career was built on performance and image management. The Rock is a character as much as he is a person. The list of toughest wrestlers comes from the character, crafted to tell a specific story about Dwayne Johnson's journey through professional wrestling. It's entertainment, just like everything else in wrestling. The toughness is real. The respect has elements of truth, but the presentation is always a work. The question is what we do with that information. Do we take The Rock's list at face value, accepting his assessment of toughness as definitive? Or do we interrogate it, looking for what's being said and what's being left unsaid? What does it mean that he praises Foley's durability, but not his own role in Foley's injuries? What does it mean that he celebrates Cena's discipline after mocking it? What does it mean that he includes Benoit without addressing the tragedy? Maybe The Rock's list says less about his rivals and more about him. Because in a world built on pain, fame, and survival, sometimes the toughest thing is figuring out what toughness is actually worth. These 10 men taught The Rock different lessons about different kinds of toughness. Some taught him what to aspire to, others taught him what to avoid, and a few taught him that the smartest form of toughness is knowing when to walk away. The wrestling business celebrates toughness because it needs tough people to perpetuate itself. If everyone walked away when the pain got too great, when the injuries accumulated, when the mental toll became obvious, there would be no wrestling industry. So wrestling creates a culture that honors toughness, that makes heroes of people who endure, that turns physical sacrifice into a measure of worth. And The Rock's list participates in that culture, perpetuating the idea that toughness is admirable, that these men should be celebrated for what they were willing to endure. But there's another way to read this list. As a catalog of costs, each name represents a different price paid for success in wrestling. Lesnar paid by having to prove himself in actual combat sports to be taken seriously. Angle paid with a neck that will never be fully healthy. Haku paid by becoming a legend more for violence than for artistry. Foley paid with his body and possibly his long-term cognitive function. Austin paid with a neck injury that forced early retirement. Triple H paid with decades of political maneuvering that made him as much businessman as performer. Shamrock paid by never being fully appreciated for his legitimate credentials. The Undertaker paid with 30 years of physical destruction. Cena paid by being mocked for the very qualities that made him successful. And Benoit paid with everything, including his life and his family. The Rock's inclusion on any toughness list would note that he paid by leaving. He gave up being a full-time wrestler to pursue other opportunities. So maybe The Rock's list of 10 toughest wrestlers is really a list of 10 different versions of himself he chose not to become. He could have been Lesnar, the legitimate fighter proving himself in real combat. He could have been Angle, the technical purist grinding out classics despite injuries. He could have been Haku, the feared enforcer whose reputation overshadowed his performance. He could have been Foley, sacrificing his health for memorable moments. He could have been Austin, retiring broken but legendary. He could have been Triple H, becoming a corporate figure while still trying to wrestle. He could have been Shamrock, never quite getting the recognition his skills deserved. He could have been Undertaker, staying too long out of love for the business. He could have been Cena, maintaining discipline despite being mocked. He could have been Benoit, working until his brain couldn't function anymore. Instead, he became The Rock, the guy who learned from all of them and then charted his own path. The guy who understood that toughness in wrestling was valuable, but toughness in knowing your own limits was more valuable still. The guy who could praise these tough wrestlers from a distance, acknowledging their contributions while implicitly arguing that his way was better. Is that cynical? Maybe, but it's also honest. The Rock's list of toughest wrestlers exists because The Rock survived to make the list. Many on the list are still dealing with the consequences of their toughness. Some can barely walk. Some struggle with pain management. One ended in unspeakable tragedy. The Rock, he's making movies, building business empires, and occasionally visiting wrestling when it's convenient or profitable. That's not a criticism of The Rock's career choices. It's a recognition that toughness is complicated, that celebrating these men's ability to endure might also mean celebrating the system that required them to endure more than any person should. That The Rock's escape from that system doesn't make him less tough. It makes him differently tough. Smart tough, survival tough. Maybe in the end, the real measurement of toughness isn't who can take the most punishment. It's who can keep their soul intact while operating in an industry designed to break bodies and exploit sacrifice. By that measure, The Rock's list tells us exactly who passed the test. It's not the 10 names on the list. It's the man who made the list and lived to tell about it. Because when you name your toughest opponents, you're really naming the obstacles you overcame. You're claiming victory over their challenges. You're saying, I faced these men, these legitimately dangerous men, these durable warriors, these intimidating figures, these disciplined athletes, and I came out on top. Not because I was tougher than them in the traditional sense, but because I was tough enough to learn from them and smart enough to not let that toughness destroy me the way it may have destroyed some of them. That's The Rock's real story, and that's what his list of 10 toughest wrestlers is actually about.